I got injured and lost my memory because of Tyler, yet he took the opportunity to break off our romantic relationship and personally destroyed all the evidence of our time together. Then he put his arm around his first love from his youth, pushed his disreputable brother in front of me, and smiled gently yet distantly, "Elodie, this is your boyfriend." Later, when I finally managed to completely shift my love away from him, he searched everywhere for famous doctors and tried every means to make me regain my memory. He regretted it bitterly and choked up as he emphasized over and over again, "Elodie, the person you love is clearly me." I just calmly looked at him, who was hysterical, and smiled, asking him, "Is that so? Where's the evidence?" On the way back from the hospital, I came across the trending topic about actor Tyler's relationship. Paparazzi released a video of him and the famous actress Jasmine holding hands and entering a hotel. Before netizens could react, the two generously admitted their relationship and revealed that they had known each other for a long time and that this was a reunion after a long separation and they couldn't help falling in love again. The trending topic exploded instantly, and the whole internet began to send their blessings. The story of actor Tyler and Jasmine, the only pure white Jasmine in the domestic entertainment industry, bravely making their way in the entertainment circle and finally meeting at the peak, made thousands of netizens cry for this beautiful love story. Within half an hour, articles about the whole story of their relationship were all over the internet. I clicked on the video information and took a careful look at the shooting time and then read the relationship articles word for word from beginning to end. They met in middle school. Tyler had a secret crush on her. After the college entrance examination, they separated. Tyler often went to visit her at her university but never bothered her. Later, both of them entered the entertainment circle and rose from being unknown to becoming huge stars. One trending topic after another exploded, and the comment that was mentioned the most was, "Wow. Secret crush plus first love plus reunion after a long separation plus meeting at the peak. This is a knockout punch. Real couples are so sweet to watch." Yes, the two of them were recently acting in a university campus drama, which was filmed on the campus of Nanning University where I taught. They played the male and female leads. This was also the reason why I got injured and was hospitalized. According to my colleagues who came to visit me, when we came out of the library and passed by a shooting site that was being set up, we encountered Tyler and Jasmine. Due to a worker's mistake, a wooden prop box fell. I reacted quickly, rushed forward and shouted, "Danger," and then pushed Tyler away, taking the impact of the falling wooden box for him. I fainted on the spot and was in a coma for 3 days. When I woke up again, I had lost my memory. I exited the trending topic and opened WeChat. Subconsciously, I scrolled the friend list to the top. My fingertip paused for a moment, but I didn't know where it should land. For some inexplicable reason, my heart felt a bit stuffy. I rolled down the car window, closed my eyes and leaned back on the seat, letting the evening wind mess up my hair. In fact, I knew about Tyler and Jasmine's relationship earlier than anyone else. It was the second day after I woke up. Tyler appeared in the ward. After returning my mobile phone that I had left at the accident scene to me, he spoke politely and distantly, "Elodie, thank you very much. We will cover all the medical expenses. If you have any other needs, you can contact my agent." After saying that, he placed a pure black business card in front of me, and then smiled at me as if he had just solved a problem that had been bothering him for a long time. "Elodie, thank you. Thank you." I stared blankly at his deep and handsome features for a moment. When he turned around and left without hesitation, I felt a panic in my heart and blurted out, "Wait a minute." A dull pain flashed through the back of my head. I looked at him as he turned around, frowned and said with some difficulty, "Tang. Tyler, did we know each other before?" It wasn't because of the plays he had acted in or the entertainment news, but simply because we already knew each other. After a moment of silence, it was Jasmine who pushed the door open and answered me. She was wearing a gauzy white dress, with her slightly curly long hair hanging behind her shoulders. She unabashedly and affectionately put her arm around Tyler's arm in front of me, took off the sunglasses on her nose and said to me, of course you know each other. Amid my growing confusion, another tall figure appeared in the ward again. Tyler pushed that person in front of me, curled his lips and said, "Elodie, this is your boyfriend. Coincidentally, he's also my friend. His name is Finn. The second son of the Finn family, which owns the largest group in Nanning City. He has countless scandals, is a playboy, drinks, races cars, and gets into fights. He's involved in all of these things. I found out all of this later when I searched online. To be honest, no matter how imaginative I am, I can't figure out how I got to know him and fell in love with him." After Tyler said that sentence, I almost subconsciously looked at Finn and asked him, "Are you my boyfriend?" His pair of peach blossom eyes turned slightly red. He squatted halfway on one side of the hospital bed, looked up at me seriously, and his voice was very gentle, "Or not?" "Huh? What I mean is, if you don't remember me, it doesn't matter. We can get to know each other again, and I'll court you all over again." Actually, the sense of familiarity I felt with him was far less than what I felt when I saw Tyler. But for some inexplicable reason, when I slightly lowered my head and looked into his eyes, it felt like something sealed deep in my heart was about to burst out. Under the premise of the extreme lack of security caused by amnesia and all kinds of evidence he provided, I took this indescribable feeling as the forgotten love for him. I chose to believe him. Later, after some time of contact, I found that he was actually very different from what the rumors said about him online. The him who was rumored to have an unpredictable temper never showed a trace of impatience when taking care of me in the hospital. Instead, he was considerate, gentle, and meticulous. Only once, when I gasped in pain because the nurse inserted the needle wrongly, he noticed it immediately and said coldly, "Get out. Change someone." The him who was rumored to be a cynical playboy actually had excellent cooking skills and took care of almost every meal for me. And at this moment, because I accidentally fell asleep, he drove the car carefully and steadily. When I woke up, I was covered with his black coat. The afterglow of the setting sun filled half of the sky outside the window. Finn was answering a phone call under a tree not far away. The cuffs of his shirt were rolled up to the middle of his forearms, and the broken hair on his forehead was tousled by the wind. When he turned his head and saw that I had woken up and was staring blankly at him, he immediately hung up the phone and walked towards me. Although I had accepted that he was my boyfriend, I was still a bit unfamiliar with him. So when he walked up to the car window, I pinched the coat and apologized carefully, "Sorry, I accidentally fell asleep. Did I delay your business?" He opened the car door, protected my head and helped me out. He bent down slightly, looked intently into my eyes, and said seriously and firmly, "Elodie, remember, with me, you have absolute priority." 15 minutes later, we walked out of the elevator and stood in front of a door. Finn skillfully entered the password and opened the door. Suddenly, a familiar yet strange atmosphere hit me. I walked in a bit slowly and stopped in front of the pure white sideboard. There was a photo on it.to be precise, it was a photo of me and a blurry figure. Judging from the angle, it was probably a selfie I took. The blurry figure was behind a frosted glass. Except for being able to tell that it was an adult male, I couldn't accurately identify who it was. I suddenly remembered that some time ago, a colleague was peeling an orange beside my hospital bed and muttered to me, "I only heard you say before that you had a boyfriend, but you didn't disclose who it was, and he never came to visit you." It was so secretive that some colleagues with wild imaginations even guessed that it was some big star. "So, it's the second son of the Finn family." I raised my hand and gently touched the figure behind the glass frame. For the first time since we met, I called out his name, Finn. I saw Tyler again on a Wednesday evening when I went back to school to continue teaching. On my way back to the office from the laboratory building, when I passed by an empty classroom, I saw him and Jasmine sitting in 2 seats by the window being interviewed by reporters. The setting sun, like molten gold, penetrated the white gauze curtain that was fluttering in the wind and fell on half of Tyler's body, as if plating a thin layer of light on him. There's one thing that I've never told anyone. Whenever it's late at night and quiet, I always can't help feeling sad. The sourness in my heart almost made it impossible for me to fall asleep. That feeling was like losing someone very important. When I tossed and turned in bed, Tyler's figure would appear in my mind. Then I would suddenly wake up and ask myself in disbelief, Elodie, what are you thinking? No one could tell me why I would think of Tyler. Just like now, no one could answer for me why I would feel so sad when I saw him and Jasmine sitting side by side intimately and smiling at each other. The reporter deliberately created a romantic and ambiguous atmosphere, and all the questions she asked were related to their relationship. She asked Tyler, "Can you describe Jasmine in one sentence?" Tyler turned his head and looked at her affectionately and said gently, "She's a beam of light that shines into my dark life." I thought about it. This was probably like what netizens summarized about the two of them, having endured domestic violence from his alcoholic father since childhood. The poor yet tenacious and unyielding male lead met the gentle and kind rich girl in middle school and got redeemed. Since then, the rich girl has become his first love for life. After getting the answer, the reporter smiled and exclaimed, "Wow." Then she asked Jasmine, "What do you think are the similarities between Tyler and the male lead in the drama you're currently filming?" She answered without hesitation, "Of course it's the same devotion." I stood quietly at the back door, like a gloomy voyeur, spying on their hard-won happiness. Until the ringtone of my mobile phone in my pocket rang unexpectedly, pulling back my wandering thoughts and interrupting their interview. The spacious and bright classroom seemed to be paused instantly. Several pairs of eyes turned to look at me. I panicked and pressed the hang-up button, tightly gripping my mobile phone, suppressing the inexplicable sourness in my heart and apologizing, "Sorry for disturbing you. I was just passing by. I'll leave now." Jasmine smiled calmly, "Teacher Elodie, it's not a disturbance. Coincidentally, we're also done here." As soon as she finished speaking, the reporter said that since we knew each other, she would leave first to catch her next schedule. Soon, only the three of us were left. Jasmine walked gracefully up to me and asked gently, "Since you accidentally saved our Tyler, it's only right that we give you some compensation. How much does Teacher Elodie need?" I was stunned for a moment. I glanced at Tyler, who had been sitting in his seat and hadn't walked over and was still facing away from me the whole time, and then looked at Jasmine in front of me. I explained seriously that I hadn't thought about asking for any compensation. Jasmine's voice was still gentle and leisurely, but every word was a warning, "Elodie, Teacher Elodie, as a teacher, don't you dare have any improper delusions." After the interview was broadcast, Tyler was given the title of the most affectionate person in the entertainment circle, and his popularity and the number of his fans kept rising. I began to deliberately avoid anyone and anything related to him and shifted my attention to Finn. Although I couldn't recall the reason why I was with him in the first place, it must have been a decision I made after careful consideration at that time. Now that an accident had happened, I didn't want to hurt my lover while I was in a state of amnesia. So, despite still feeling a bit confused in my heart, I was still willing to get to know him again and fall in love with him anew. After thinking it over carefully, I chose my words and asked him, "How did I get along with you in the past?" He was peeling a grapefruit for me at that time. Hearing my words, he paused his fingers for a moment, then turned his head and looked at me seriously, saying, "Elodie, you don't have to imitate how you were before. I'll like you no matter what you're like. Just do what you want to do." I came to understand as I stared at him in a daze. What he meant was that he didn't expect me to love him as I did before, but he would love me just as much as he did in the past. Suddenly, a subtle emotion welled up in my heart. All of a sudden, I felt a bit of inexplicable gratitude that the person with me was him. After that, we started to do the same things as all ordinary couples did. We ate meals and went on dates together, went shopping and watched movies together. Occasionally, I would also try hard to recall my past with him. However, my mind was always blank whenever I did that. But in the second month after I lost my memory, when Finn came to pick me up from school after work, a colleague ran over to me with a big smile on her face, handed me a beautifully packaged gift box, and told me, "Elodie, the watch we reserved together a year ago has arrived. In my puzzled expression, she explained that it was a watch store opened by her friend. Every watch was handmade and unique. Once when she took me to visit it, I described my preferred style to the designer and ordered one, saying that I wanted to give it to my boyfriend. I also left a message card. To be honest, the watch was indeed exquisitely made and quite understated, but its style didn't match Finn's at all. Here's the message card I left at that time. Finn didn't say a word from start to finish. It wasn't until he reached out and slowly opened the card that his furrowed brow suddenly relaxed. I thought he also felt that the watch didn't suit him. I looked down at the watch worth tens of millions on his wrist and said in a low voice, "It doesn't matter if you don't like it." After all, I didn't know whether there was something wrong with my description to the designer or something went wrong during the production process of the watch, which led to this situation. After I said that, he gave a low laugh. His voice was terribly hoarse as he said to me word by word, "I like it. I like it very much. I'll like anything you give me." After saying that, he immediately put on the watch I gave him and never took it off since then. Later, I was also a bit curious about what message I had left on the card, so I opened it and took a look. It was indeed my handwriting, but on the clean and tidy page, there was only one letter, Y. I held the card in my hand and was lost in thought for a long time in the howling wind outside the window. I guessed that it must refer to Finn. On the day when Tyler and Jasmine finished filming their campus drama, I accidentally came across their live connection during the break of a meeting. Someone asked him what the reason was for him to have a crush on Jasmine. In the video, he shifted his gaze a little, as if he was recalling something or thinking about it. Finally, he looked at Jasmine affectionately and said, "Her beauty is something I've never seen before." Considering his background, I could probably understand what he meant. For someone who had been in the darkness, when he suddenly met someone completely opposite to himself one day, it was indeed easy to be attracted. After hearing the answer, someone else sent a flood of comments and asked him, "Have you really never had a crush on anyone else in all these years and only liked Jasmine?" After seeing the question, he suddenly fell silent for a few seconds, and the smile on his lips faded a little. No one knew whether he was confirming his feelings or thinking of another person during those silent seconds. But after the silence, he looked at the screen and replied firmly, "No." There was a burst of cheers in the barrage of the live broadcast, and fans crazily sent hearts and roses. It was at this moment that I suddenly realized that it seemed that I hadn't thought of him for a long time. Now, even if I saw him again, there wouldn't be a ripple in my heart. That feeling of emptiness that kept me awake at night had disappeared long ago without my knowing when. I couldn't tell why, but this discovery made me feel relaxed and a bit happy. Later, when the meeting ended, I walked cheerfully to the school gate with an umbrella. In the misty and rainy night, I saw Finn's car quietly parked under a dim yellow street lamp. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. 3.5 hours had passed since I was suddenly informed to attend a meeting and then sent him a message saying that he didn't need to wait for me. The rain was sliding down the glass window in streams. My heart suddenly felt damp. After being surprised, I got into the car and sighed helplessly, "It's so late. I told you that you didn't need to wait for me." He carefully wiped the water droplets on my cheeks with a towel. His clear and dark eyes fell on my face, and he said extremely seriously, "But I wanted to see you." So he would keep waiting for me. In the narrow and slightly damp carriage, an indescribable chaotic atmosphere rose. I looked at his handsome eyes and eyebrows, and my heartbeat uncontrollably sped up. I seemed to understand why I had a crush on him before I lost my memory. I thought that if nothing unexpected happened, Finn would be the person I was willing to spend my whole life with. Even if I couldn't remember the past, I would fall in love with him again sooner or later. However, an accident happened precisely. Just half a month later, on a sunset-filled evening, Finn and I were walking on a commercial street after coming out of a restaurant. We were just about to go to the flower shop beside us to buy a bunch of hyacinths. Suddenly, a huge billboard on the outer layer of a building fell down. It was an advertisement for the "Love Only One Person in a Lifetime" rings that Tyler and Jasmine had filmed. Finn reacted quickly and hugged me and threw us to one side, and we narrowly escaped death. However, The loud noise of the billboard hitting the ground, the chaotic sounds of people and cars, and the overly familiar scene made me have a strong tinnitus in a daze. Until the sudden sound of the police siren, like a sharp blade, unexpectedly cut a hole in my sealed memory. Countless fragments of images rushed into my mind in a scramble. Tyler and I were childhood sweethearts who had known each other for 18 years. We were also a couple who had been together for 4 years. The year we met, he was a thin and weak teenager who had lost his mother since childhood and was often beaten by his father at home. And I was a girl who had been abducted and sold by human traffickers to a small, poor, and remote mountain village. I used lotus leaves to hold clear water and saved him when he fainted by the roadside due to being beaten by his father under the scorching sun. He also tightly held a stone and protected me behind him when I was bullied by the rascals in the village. During that dark time, every word he taught me to read was like a shining star, carrying my wishes. Until I saw a handwritten sentence on a book that had been donated from outside the mountain and brought by him: "As long as you never give up, you will surely see hope." The hope buried deep in my heart immediately broke through the soil and sprouted. I told Tyler, "We can't rot here. Let's escape." Tyler. I wasn't allowed to go to school or run around freely, but Tyler could. If he wanted to leave, he definitely could. At first, he hesitated. Later, after he was almost beaten to death by his drunken father again, we escaped. That year, I was 13 years old, and it was the 5th year since I had arrived at the mountain village. After that, we went through a long and hard time. Fortunately, with the help of social assistance, we got the opportunity to study. However, since I had never been to school before, I was much behind Tyler in my studies. So when he was in high school, I was still making up for the junior high school courses. It was also at that time that Tyler met Jasmine. But the first time I heard this name and saw this person was on the night of their graduation party after Tyler finished the college entrance examination. I was waiting for Tyler outside the hotel with his coat in my arms. After the party ended, just as I was carefully helping the drunk Tyler, I suddenly heard someone shout loudly, "Jasmine." At that instant, Tyler's body stiffened almost imperceptibly. I subconsciously looked in the direction of the voice. I didn't see the face clearly. I only saw a beautiful and slender back. After we went back, Tyler fell drunk into my arms and mumbled as if talking to himself, "How can someone like me, who is stuck in the mire, reach the moon?" I thought he was talking about his dream, so later I studied hard and made money, helped him analyze every character he got, and applied for countless small accounts to be his fans and encourage him. I carefully guarded his dream, but I didn't expect that the moon he mentioned was Jasmine. In the past, he was stuck in the mire and couldn't reach the moon. Later, he became a big star, and the moon came to him. The first drama he and Jasmine acted in was after he won the Best Actor award. In the drama, they played each other's first love, but Jasmine's character died in the year when the male character played by Tyler loved her the most. So although her role didn't have many scenes and hardly any lines, the romantic setting, the deep love and the unforgettable tragic ending still made her, who had just debuted, win the title of the only pure Jasmine in the Chinese entertainment industry. After that, almost every drama she acted in was related to Tyler. Until this campus drama. So everything had a trace to follow. So the day when he said he didn't have time to accompany me to the ancient temple in Nanjing to pray for eternal love was the day when he was staying in a hotel with Jasmine. And then when I got injured and lost my memory because of him, he cut off our relationship as a couple and personally destroyed all the evidence of our being together. Finn drove the car at a very high speed and finally stopped outside the hospital. He was still worried and carefully helped me out of the car, intending to take me to see a doctor for an examination. I let him hold my hand and followed him absent-mindedly. The joints on the back of his hands were scratched and bleeding due to friction with the ground. His black shirt was soiled when he was protecting me, and his messy short hair was blown by the evening wind, looking rather disheveled. This was completely different from when I first met him. At a colleague's birthday party half a year ago, on my way back to the private room from the washroom, I accidentally entered their private room because of the harassment from a drunken man. Under the dim and flickering lights, there were all kinds of handsome men and beautiful women gathered. But I immediately saw Finn, who had his long legs crossed casually, leaning on the sofa and playing with a lighter. At that time, he was noble, elegant, lazy, and casual. Even Tyler, who was sitting beside him, seemed inferior to him. Later, the drunken man grasped me tightly, saying that I was his girlfriend. Tyler turned his head away to avoid my pleading eyes, and everyone else was just watching the fun as if it had nothing to do with them. Only he threw away the lighter and walked up to me. His overly powerful aura made the drunken man stop his actions for a moment. Finn asked me, "Are you his girlfriend?" I shook my head in a panic and helplessly, and explained hurriedly and firmly, "No, I'm not. I don't know him." After I said that, he suddenly smiled at me and comforted me, "Don't be afraid. You're so good looking that I believe you." Then, before anyone could react, he quickly pinched the drunken man's wrist to force him to let go of me, and then picked up a bottle of wine and smashed it on his head without hesitation. With a loud bang, the private room instantly became silent. I was sent back to my private room in a daze, and I even forgot to say thank you. At first, I thought he was just being a good Samaritan. It wasn't until later, when the party ended and I passed by that private room again and saw the door half open and the people gone, that I heard someone ask Finn, "Why did President Finn just take action to save her?" After a long while, Finn said in a low voice. The distress and tenderness in his voice lingered in my mind for a long time. He said, "I saw her shadow in those eyes." Her? The memory came to an abrupt end. I suddenly stopped in my tracks and held his fingers tightly with my backhand. People were coming and going in the hospital. Finn turned around in confusion and asked gently, "What's wrong?" I avoided his gaze and looked at his wrist. When I spoke, my throat somehow felt a bit sore. "I'm okay. There's no need for an examination. Also, Finn, take off the watch. It wasn't given to you." Y refers to Tyler. I got into a taxi wearing the watch. The figure standing still like a sculpture reflected in the rearview mirror gradually disappeared from sight. I opened my phone to search for keywords related to Tyler and carefully read through every detail of his relationship with Jasmine until I saw the scene where they reenacted their confession on a recent wild couple reality show. Flowers, the setting sun, hot air balloons, it was all infinite romance and love. The moisture in my eyes was dried by the wind. I remembered the night when Tyler asked me to be with him. That year, I was a junior in college. On my way back from a classmate gathering, a male classmate gave me a ride. After arriving at the community, he suddenly confessed his love to me. I was so shocked that I didn't even have time to react before Tyler, who had just come back, pulled me behind him. He coldly said to that male classmate, "She already has a boyfriend." I stood there in a daze. It wasn't until that male classmate apologized and left that I came to my senses and asked Tyler softly, What did you just say?" He didn't let go of my hand and said to me, "Elodie, let's be together." I did like him. When I was 8 years old, I was abducted and sold to a mountain village. I was beaten because I couldn't stop crying, and I had a high fever for several days, which made me forget many people and things. Later, I saved Tyler, who was unconscious by the roadside. When I watched him leave, I somehow had an impulse to follow him. Then we depended on each other for decades and saw each other's most embarrassing moments. So in the end, it seemed quite normal for us to be together. To cooperate with him, I never told anyone about our relationship in public, only using a small "y" to convey my feelings. Not long after we got together, he became famous with a supporting role that lasted less than half an hour. After that, his career took off, and the distance between him and me grew wider and wider. Now, looking back, as long as either of the two conditions, Jasmine didn't leave and the male classmate didn't confess his love to me, hadn't been met, Tyler wouldn't have asked me to be with him. After all, he had never said that he liked me. I closed the page, paid the fare and got out of the taxi and then casually threw the watch into a roadside trash can. Since he wanted to erase all our past, I didn't want it either. If it hadn't been for that accident of being abducted back then, We should have been completely from two different worlds and would never have had any connection. Just like now. And in the future. I had no intention of pestering Tyler. He wasn't worth me wasting any more emotions on. However, on the second day after I regained my memory, the relationship between Tyler and Jasmine was on the hot search again. The reason was that when they went on a mountain exploration during the Wild Couple reality show, they encountered a heavy rainstorm and a landslide. Due to the inadequate protection measures of the production team, everyone, including the staff, was injured to varying degrees. Among them, Tyler was the most seriously injured. At that time, because he was carrying Jasmine, who had a foot ache, he had been walking at the end of the team and was in a low-lying area. When the danger occurred later, Tyler lifted Jasmine up and climbed towards a higher place, but Jasmine, because she was afraid of being hit by the falling rocks and trees, didn't turn around to pull Tyler but ran away instead. The chaotic and fragmented video was exposed, and it was hard to tell whether it was true or false. Netizens had different opinions, and the most frequently posted comments were, "How could a girl like Jasmine pull a man who is 1.8 meters tall? She must have gone to get help." Understandable. When disaster strikes, everyone for himself. Ha ha ha, why wasn't it Jasmine who got hurt? How could she deserve Tyler's deep affection? The only two people who knew the truth, Jasmine remained silent from beginning to end. Tyler survived the disaster, but he broke a leg and was in a coma. A colleague held his phone and sighed, "Are these two being punished by heaven? Last time you saved them from a disaster, but then this more serious one came. It's really impossible to avoid misfortunes." I turned off the screen and didn't pay any more attention, smiling and saying, "Maybe." I didn't mention the fact that I had regained my memory to anyone except Finn, so no one knew that we had separated. But my life got back on track. It's just that I would often habitually look at a window seat that few people sat in before class. There, every time Finn sneaked in to listen to my public classes wearing a black hoodie and a baseball cap of the same color, he would sit there. In a classroom with hundreds of people, as long as he showed up, I would always notice him at a glance, but he never made a sound to disturb others. He would just focus on and seriously hold a pen to draw on the paper dot on the plain white paper, with black lines. Every time he sketched with just a few strokes, it was me who was giving the lecture. With almond-shaped eyes, curved eyebrows, long hair tied up, and even the small mole on my left eyebrow was taken into account. I was surprised at his drawing skills. He would hold the drawing and sigh, "The person I drew is really good looking." When I absent-mindedly looked through the crowd of heads towards that seat again before class, a student in the front row came over and asked, "Teacher, are you waiting for someone?" I tightened my grip on the textbook, lowered my head, smiled and said naturally, "I'm not waiting for anyone." And no one would come. Later, when the bell rang after class, I stood on the podium as usual and waited for all the students to leave first. A few minutes later, just as I was walking down the podium with my books in my arms, suddenly wind blew in through the open window. Somehow, a piece of paper was rolled up from somewhere, flew across most of the classroom and finally landed in front of the door. The bright sunlight shone on the paper, and every line was clearly visible just right. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I turned around to look at the empty classroom and stood there for a long time. I have to admit that if my feelings for Tyler died during the time when I lost my memory, then my feelings for Finn also grew during that period of amnesia. But I knew better than anyone else that the person he really liked wasn't me. So since I regained my memory, I had been deliberately avoiding meeting him. Until that night when I attended a pre-wedding single party held by a rich second-generation colleague. I went out of the lively private room to get some fresh air. While leaning on the glass railing of the hotel to reply to messages, I accidentally saw Finn standing in the transparent elevator that was going up opposite me. He was wearing a pure black shirt, with the cuffs rolled up to his forearms. He was holding his suit jacket in his left hand and had his right hand casually in his pocket. Behind him were several people of his age. When our eyes met, the elevator had already stopped. I saw someone pat him on the shoulder, reminding him that it was time to go. I withdrew my gaze and returned to the private room. Someone handed me a glass of grapefruit juice and asked me if I wanted to participate in the next activity after the party ended. I politely declined. Sitting in a dark corner, I looked at the flashing colored lights and inappropriately remembered the first time I saw Finn when I just woke up in the ward after losing my memory. Actually, there were many loopholes in the evidence he provided about our being together. As long as I thought about it more carefully, I could have found the flaws. But at that time, I had just lost my memory and was in desperate need of a sense of security, so I subconsciously found reasons to rationalize everything that was unreasonable. I think Tyler must not have considered the dangerous situation I would face when he made the decision to abandon me. Now that I think about it, I'm quite glad that the person who pretended to be my boyfriend was Finn. After the party ended, I sat alone in the completely quiet private room for a while. It wasn't until I finished the last sip of grapefruit juice in my glass that I got up and opened the door of the private room. Then I saw Finn, who had been standing outside the door for I don't know how long. He had his hands in his pockets, tilted his head slightly and casually leaned against the wall, as if he had been waiting for the door to be opened. A faint smell of alcohol floated in the air. I was silent for a moment and then asked him, "What's the matter?" "I want to see you." His overly honest and straightforward answer made me not know what to say for a moment. I could only sigh and tell him, "Finn, we have nothing to do with each other anymore." What if I say that I really like you? Actually, I once imagined in front of the mirror how much I looked like that girl to make him be so affectionate and reluctant to let go. But he saved me once and also lied to me once. We're even. So when he spoke again, Elodie, actually I interrupted him. Do I need to be blunt? Finn, I don't want to have anything to do with you, whether it was in the past, now, or in the future. The lesson I learned from Tyler told me that a wrong relationship shouldn't have existed from the beginning, probably because of the light. His face turned pale for a moment. He opened his mouth and after a while asked me in a somewhat hoarse voice, "Can't we even be friends?" I looked at him and firmly refused. "I don't need you as a friend." I originally thought that after making things clear to Finn, I would gain inner peace. However, that wasn't the case. During every sleepless night when I tossed and turned, what came to my mind was his pale face. As a result, every little thing that happened during the short time I spent with him began to clearly emerge in my mind. What was worse was that he still kept coming to find me, wanting to see me and always showed up beside me in various ways. As time passed, I became especially sensitive to his figure, his name, and the faint scent of pine trees that was unique to him. Even when I saw someone who looked similar to him, I would subconsciously avoid them. I knew that it wasn't him that I was avoiding. It was my own heart. The day I saw the news that Finn had become the person in power of the Finn family, I was shopping in the supermarket. Numerous financial and entertainment media reported information about him. He lost his mother at a young age and his father remarried. The child brought by his stepmother was his half-brother. Later, he was suppressed and disliked, so he could only hide his strength and ambition, just waiting for the day to seize power. It's worth mentioning that someone found out that he had been doing charity since he was a child and would donate supplies to orphanages and remote mountainous areas every year. I stood among the shelves filled with various fruit juices and looked up at the large screen hanging above. It was the interview scene where countless reporters stretched their microphones in front of Finn. In the video, he wasn't the cynical person that netizens used to describe, nor was he the gentle and elegant one in my impression. Instead, he was cold, distant, and looked down from a superior position, exuding an air of someone in a position of power. The reporter deliberately asked why he took this position instead of his elder brother who was an elite with overseas education and excellent abilities. Facing the difficult question, he looked down at the people in front of him and smiled faintly. "Don't you understand the principle that the strong take the position?" Somehow, I suddenly remembered the scene when he hit someone with a wine bottle to save me. Perhaps that was the real him, gentle yet fierce, cold yet crazy. But during the short time I was with him, I didn't have time to learn about his family, so this was the first time I knew about his life story. I had guessed before that he deliberately spread those rumors, but I didn't expect it was for such reasons. The next second, a gossipy reporter in the video asked. "There's news that President Finn has been looking for a girl. Is she the person you love?" The scene was quiet for a moment. Finn looked at the camera with gentle eyes and said, "Yes." I calmly withdrew my gaze and continued shopping. It wasn't until I was checking out that I realized I had picked up the wrong juice. After that, Finn still kept showing up beside me as usual. Although he didn't mention wanting to be with me again, everything he did told me that he hadn't given up yet. When my car broke down in the heavy rain, he was the first to arrive. When I sprained my ankle while climbing a mountain, he also showed up and carried me down the mountain. Until one time when I was infected with the flu at school and was resting at home, he knocked on the door. At that time, I still hadn't completely recovered from the fever, and the little bit of sanity left was still reminding me to keep a distance from him. So after I said, "Stay away from me. You'll get infected," I was about to close the door. He reached out his hand to block it, squeezed into the room, closed the door behind him, and looked at me, saying, "I'm not afraid." My head was dizzy after taking the medicine, and I didn't have the energy to argue with him, so I just lay down on the sofa and let him do as he liked. When I was with Tyler before, he seldom had time to accompany me whenever I was sick. Most of the time, I went to the hospital alone, took medicine alone, and got better slowly by myself. I'm not a delicate person. He was busy, and I could understand that. I could take care of myself without his care. But now, when I saw Finn feeding me water and going to the kitchen to cook porridge for me in a daze, I was a bit curious. So I asked him, "Finn, aren't you busy?" He had just taken over the company, and there were only more things that needed his handling, not less. Staying with me would only be a waste of time for him. He squatted beside the sofa and carefully wiped my cheek with a wet towel. His breath, which was very close, gently fell on my side face, and it was almost impossible to avoid. After a long while, I heard him say, "Elodie, I remember I said that nothing is more important than you." Perhaps because emotions are more sensitive when one is sick, my heart couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. Obviously, I wasn't this sad when I was sick and alone before. I closed my eyes and didn't say anything, but I couldn't fall asleep no matter what. What came to my ears was the very light sound of his movements. It didn't disturb me, but it made me feel extremely at ease. I don't know how long it had passed. Night had fallen. I opened my eyes and saw Finn standing in the kitchen, looking at the usage instructions on a bunch of medicine boxes. The orange sunset shone through the glass and fell on him. I stepped on the soft carpet, walked over, quietly leaned against the kitchen door, looked at his back, and then said in a hoarse voice, "Finn, have you found that girl?" His back visibly stiffened for a moment. He put down the medicine boxes in his hand and looked back at me. "Yes, I have." My throat was a bit sore. I wanted to ask why he still came to pester me, but to maintain a bit of dignity, I asked him, "Aren't you two together?" He took a step closer and sighed. "She said she didn't want to be with me and didn't want to have anything to do with me. So he came to me and treated me as a substitute? And I was just borrowing her light and being loved briefly." I felt my heart tremble a little. I lowered my head, not wanting to look at him, and a whole tear fell from my eye, soaking into the hem of his trousers. Finally, I compromised and said, "Finn, could you please stop doing this? I admit that I like you, but this doesn't mean that I can give up my principles and be a substitute. Why do you have to keep pushing?" His breath became a bit heavier, and he repeated word by word, "Like me." I lowered my head and cried silently until he suddenly hugged me tightly. Although my dizzy head became even more muddled due to the emotional fluctuations, it didn't prevent me from hearing him say, "Elodie, it was you who said you didn't want to have anything to do with me." The tightly stretched heartstrings suddenly broke at this moment. Something slowly emerged in my mind and I belatedly asked him, "Was it me?" He gently pressed my head against his chest and his voice was low and hoarse. "Yes, it was you. 18 years. It's really been too long. Since I was beaten when I was 8 years old and had a high fever that wouldn't go down for several days, I forgot everything before that. My earliest memory started after I was 8 years old. So I didn't know who my parents and relatives were. Even though I had thought about finding my family later, there had been no news for so many years, but I never expected that Finn would be related to my family before I was 8 years old. When I was 3 years old, my parents died accidentally in a chemical experiment explosion. I was taken home by my mother's best friend to be raised. After that, Finn appeared in my life. We were together for 5 years. Until I was 8 years old, Finn's father used the excuse of taking me to find Finn to go to see his first love, and then he lost me. In the following 18 years, Finn had been looking for me. That's what he told me. But this memory that had long disappeared from my mind and might never come back made me unsure if I was the person he was looking for. After all, I had no family for a long time. So how could I prove it? What if he had mistaken me for someone else? I asked him this question the next day. Hearing this, he handed me an album which contained all the photos of me and him, starting from when I was 3 years old until I was 8 years old. Without exception, there was always a small mole on the left eyebrow of the girl in the photos. After I was 8 years old, there was a hand-drawn girl beside him in every photo. That was the picture he drew of me. He had been drawing it for 18 years. Probably seeing that I had been silent all the time and worried that it was because the past memories made me sad, he pretended to be relaxed and said, "I imagined how you would look as you grew up each year, but after all, imagination is far less beautiful than the real you." I held the album and listened quietly, and then asked him, "Is it just because of this mole between the eyebrows?" He paused for a moment, took out our last photo together, turned it over, and there was a sentence written crookedly on the back, "Be together forever." Below the words were 2 tiny fingerprints. I looked at that sentence and heard Finn laugh self-deprecatingly. At that time, no one knew that just after we said we'd be together forever, we were completely separated. Not long after that, Finn took me to visit my parents and his mother respectively. I also met the person he said was the culprit who caused his mother's death and lost me. His father. In the cold and lonely ward, Finn held my hand and stood in front of the hospital bed, smiling casually. He looked down at the person on the bed who couldn't speak due to a stroke and said, "I have good news for you. Do you want to hear it?" After saying that, he opened a paternity test report in front of him and said word by word, "Congratulations. You've raised someone else's son for 29 years. You must stay alive. Don't accidentally die of anger and dirty my mother's path of reincarnation." After saying that, he threw the report at his father, smiled with red eyes, and then put his arm around me and left the ward. Before going out, I looked back and saw that the person on the bed looked at the ceiling hopelessly after being shocked, with a glint of tears in his eyes. Of course, I wouldn't sympathize with him. He should taste the consequences of the causes he had created himself. The next time I heard news about Tyler was when he woke up from a coma. Then came the hot search topic about his sudden breakup with Jasmine. The relationship that had once been blessed by the whole internet ended in a hasty and messy way. And by then, no one cared about the truth of what had happened at the scene. Not long after that, Jasmine was photographed having meals and watching movies with a newly emerged top star. Starting a new relationship, the two of them calmly admitted their love affair. It was said that they were each other's first love, had known each other since childhood, and were now reuniting after a separation. A new batch of their CP fans exclaimed, "Oh my God! Childhood sweethearts plus first love plus getting back together after a breakup. I'm so obsessed with them." Tyler's legs weren't completely disabled. He could walk with the help of crutches. During the time when he was hospitalized after waking up, he called me countless times. I looked at that string of numbers which I was extremely familiar with but had no remarks and didn't answer any of the calls. Finally, I put him on the blacklist. Later, he probably called me using someone else's mobile phone. I accidentally answered it once. After hearing him call Elodie, I hung up directly. Actually, before he was discharged from the hospital, when I went to visit a highly respected professor in the hospital, I passed by his ward. At that time, he seemed to be arguing with Jasmine. Both of them were in an unstable mood, so I could clearly hear Jasmine shouting at him, "I didn't mean not to pull you." It was so dangerous at that time. What if I had been hit? Tyler, don't you love me very much? Why are you blaming me? Besides, you'll only be a burden to me now. After a long while, Tyler gave a low, light laugh. His voice was very hoarse. Get out. I didn't know whether that light laugh was him mocking what he thought was a mutual pursuit of love or regretting his deep affection over the years. But it had nothing to do with me anymore. However, he still came to find me not long after he was discharged from the hospital. I wasn't very surprised. I knew this day would come sooner or later. That night, as soon as I got out of the elevator with a bunch of hyacinths in my arms, I saw him standing outside my house, leaning on crutches. He was wearing a black windbreaker, his hair had been cut short, there were obvious bloodshot eyes, his cheeks were slightly sunken, and he seemed to have lost a lot of weight. When he saw me, he suddenly took a step closer with red eyes and said, "Elodie." I took a step back and looked at him distantly. "Tyler, are we that familiar?" Suddenly, he grabbed my hand and said hurriedly, "Elodie, I'm your boyfriend." "Finn isn't. He's lying to you. Jasmine and I were just in a contractual relationship. Elodie, the person you've always liked is me." I looked at him calmly and with confusion, then slowly pulled my hand out. I asked him, "Really? Then how can you prove that the person I like is you?" He couldn't provide any evidence. Then he began to try every means to take me to see a doctor. He said, "Elodie, you just forgot about me. As long as you remember, you'll know who the person you really like is. I found the most famous brain doctor. He will definitely help you recover your memory." When I didn't cooperate with him to go to the hospital, he started talking about the past, saying that we had escaped from the remote mountain with great difficulties together, that we had lived in the basement and eaten instant noodles together, promising to be together forever. He said that I had taken care of him day and night when he was sick and also that I had waited in the heavy snow all night just to accompany him to an audition. You see, he remembered all those things. But he still didn't hesitate to abandon me. The person who had least hoped that I would recover my memory before was now trying every possible way to make me remember. I guessed that he must not have expected that he would turn back one day. Looking at his appearance with slightly red eyes at the corners and begging humbly, I remained indifferent. On the afternoon when I refused to see him again, I received a letter. It was written by me 4 years ago. It was when I just got together with Tyler. Suddenly, it became popular on the internet to write letters to one's future self. I thought it was interesting and asked Tyler to write one too. But he didn't write one. Only I did. If nothing unexpected happened, this was probably the only evidence that could prove that we had been together. The sky after the rain was filled with the glow of sunset, as if the sky at the horizon was on fire. I took the letter and walked into the bathroom without opening it. I burned it. For a long time after that, he was so preoccupied with his physical condition and work that he couldn't continue to pester me. The next time we met was in early autumn. I walked out of the library and was walking on the Phoenix tree-lined road. The yellowing fallen leaves were slowly falling down. When I saw a pavilion not far away, I unconsciously stopped in my tracks. It was right here that the rustling sound of feet stepping on Phoenix tree leaves came from behind me. I stood still and heard a deep and hoarse voice. "It was right here that you blocked a wooden box for me and then forgot about me since then." Somehow, I suddenly remembered the hot search topic I had seen a few days ago. The top star who got back together with Jasmine originally had a girlfriend, but he lied to his girlfriend that he was just creating a CP hype with Jasmine. Soon it was discovered that he was cheating. His girlfriend immediately threw out evidence to prove their cheating and meddling. Amid the netizens' scolding of the two of them, someone began to summarize Jasmine's representative works since her debut: falling in love with the best actor, falling in love with the top star. Not long after that, a new pure Jasmine emerged in the Chinese entertainment industry. As for Tyler, his leg injury limited his acting career. The fans who had once promised to never leave him gradually shifted their attention to the newly debuted young actors. There were plenty of people who were younger, better looking, and in better health than him. Sooner or later, he would end up being ignored by everyone. So after acting in the last movie about rebirth and changing one's fate, he announced that he would no longer act in any TV series or movies. He only occasionally participated in some variety shows. But at least, he left with the title of the most affectionate person in the Chinese entertainment industry. After all, in all the variety shows or activities he participated in later, the host would always mention this title. Wow, welcome our, the most affectionate person in the Chinese entertainment industry, Tyler. No one knew what was on his mind every time he heard this title. Just like the story between him and me, no one would know it anymore. As my thoughts came back, I turned around and looked at him, smiling relievedly. Really? I don't remember. After saying that, I turned around and left. After a few steps, the wind brought his murmuring to my ears. If I could go back to the year when we first met, I would never let go of your hand again. My steps paused slightly. I curved my lips and continued walking forward. He was wrong. If I could go back to that year, I wouldn't meet him again. Now, I was just getting back on the right track of fate. At the end of the road, Finn was standing there. I ran towards him. He reached out his hands to catch me and then took me to an extremely romantic private garden. Since I learned about my life story, Finn and I had tacitly not mentioned getting together. So at that moment, I thought he was going to confess his love. Instead, I saw him slowly pushing a cake over and saying to me, "Elodie, happy birthday." I was in a daze for a moment while holding the flowers. So this was my real birthday. Later, he placed 18 exquisitely packaged boxes in front of me. His eyes were dark and shiny. These are 18 years worth of belated gifts. My eyes felt a bit sour. I looked at him with tears in my eyes and a smile on my face. Finn, you don't really have to be so nice to me. This feeling of being cherished made me a bit at a loss. He held my face in his hands and looked steadily into my eyes. I've signed an agreement to be nice to you for a lifetime. I looked at his handsome face so close to me and on an impulse, I stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. Instantly, his whole body became stiff, and his ears quickly turned red and the redness was spreading. This made me want to laugh. While he was still standing there in a daze, I took out the watch from my bag, looked at his empty wrist, and said to him, "Give me your hand." He obediently stretched out his hand in front of me and let me carefully put the watch on his wrist. A subtle atmosphere rose in the air, and somehow it gave me the illusion that I was putting a ring on him. Just as I was carefully admiring the watch after putting it on, he suddenly grasped the back of my head, quickly moved closer, and took my breath away. A few minutes later, I opened the camera on my mobile phone to take a look. Because I had forgotten to breathe and was lack of oxygen, my face was almost as red as his. Just as I was about to carefully check if my lips were chapped, Finn suddenly rushed into the frame, grasped my hand and my mobile phone, and pressed the shutter button. Since then, the group photo that had been interrupted when I was 8 years old was resumed from this moment. Extra Story 1. Finn, the longest journey I've ever taken in my life was the journey to meet Elodie. It took a full 18 years. If it hadn't been for that accident back then, the person who should have been by her side and grown up with her would have been me. Even to this day, I can still remember that ordinary afternoon. When I came back from my cello class, I learned that Elodie had been lost. I was 10 years old that year. It was the first time I experienced the feeling of being separated from someone important. I held the photo we took the day before and stayed awake all night. After that, I started to donate money, materials, and do charity work for various orphanages and impoverished mountainous areas. Even if there was only a 1 in 10,000 possibility, I still hoped that Elodie could live a better life somewhere. I also went to learn painting, imagining what she would look like as she grew up year by year. As our family business grew bigger and bigger, my father's affair during the marriage was discovered. Only then did I realize that on that day, he used the excuse of taking Elodie to find me to meet his first love and ended up losing Elodie. The following year, my mother passed away in depression. He, his first love, and their illegitimate child became a family. And I became the most redundant person. But how could things be so easy? He used the money brought by my mother to start businesses and make investments, and then drove my mother to her death. In the end, their family lived a happy life. Later, under the surveillance and suppression of that woman, I became a good-for-nothing playboy as she wished. I hung out with a bunch of bad friends every day. And then, I met Elodie at a party. When she pushed the door open in a panic and looked over with a pair of frightened eyes, my heart suddenly skipped a beat. However, in the past 18 years, I had met too many people who were similar to her in my memory, and every time the result was disappointment. So this time, after I sent her back to the private room, I hesitated. What if the result of verification was disappointment again? I heard that there was an ancient tree with a history of thousands of years in the ancient temple in the south of the city, which could fulfill any wishes. I didn't believe it before, but now I wanted to give it a try. After climbing the 3,600 steps, I stood in front of the ancient tree full of red wishing ribbons, firmly tied the wishing ribbon I got onto the branch, put my hands together and prayed piously, I hope I can see her. I hope we can be together forever. At the same time as I said these words, there was a soft, somewhat familiar female voice. The moment the words were spoken, all the wishing ribbons on the whole tree suddenly fluttered in the wind. A clear sound of bells came from the corner of the eaves. Through the fluttering red ribbons, I looked sideways to the other side of the tree. It was Elodie. Looking at her beautiful eyes and eyebrows, the thought of giving it another try suddenly emerged in my heart. If meeting once among thousands of people was a coincidence, then what about meeting twice? I remembered that when I donated books one year, I wrote a sentence in the book, as long as you never give up, there will always be hope. I never gave up, so I really found her later. When I went to check her past information, I found out that she was with Tyler. However, unexpectedly, she lost her memory due to an injury for Tyler's sake not long after, and Tyler, for the sake of his first love, wanted to take the opportunity to get rid of her. When I offered to help him, I once said to him, before, now, and in the future, Tyler, you will never have anything to do with her again. He was so immersed in the joy of being able to be with his first love at that time that he didn't pay attention to my words. After that, on top of his hurriedly destroying the evidence of his acquaintance with Elodie, I had people carefully search for traces about them and then destroyed them again by myself. Until there was nothing that could prove they had been together, unless Elodie herself remembered and was willing to admit it. Everyone said that my feelings for her were just a whim, a boring pastime. No one knew how nervous and precious I felt when I pushed open the door of the ward and stood in front of her, although I had long disappeared from her memory. But it didn't matter. We could get to know each other again. On an afternoon after 18 years, it was our first meeting. It was also a reunion after a long separation.